All right, I'm Andy Johnson, your host for another thrilling episode about academic writing. Today I'm going to focus just on an overview of writing a literature review. This is for my course, 635 Research and Education. It's the end product. However, for anyone who's writing a literature review, a short one, a long one, for a course, a thesis, this will give you a sense of where to start. We can't expect you to know what to do if you've never done a literature review. So first of all, an overview of a lit review. It is a review of what the literature says about a topic. It's not a review of what you think about the topic. It's what does the literature say about the topic. It's not what you have to say about the topic. It's not a review of what a book says or a famous person says, or it is not a how to implement a program. It is a review of the literature. And I'll show you how to think about this in just a minute. And for this course and most, let us think in terms of a short article, which is a minimum of 12 sources. These should be peer-reviewed journal articles. And we'll talk about this in another episode. But we use peer-reviewed journal articles because they are usually the most up-to-date. Peer review is important. And journal articles are easier to review. They're more concise than reading books. The question I get often, okay, a lit review, this is for this class. How long should it be? How many pages? Think about this. Say what needs to be said. If you say what needs to be said about your topic, I would say 7 to 12 double spaces would be the minimum. But instead of what should be the minimum, what says what I need to say? What does the literature say? I am going to make myself, you are going to make yourself a knowledgeable expert. So to become a knowledgeable expert in just a little slice of something, 12 sources is really the absolute minimum. Now, oftentimes it goes through people's heads. How can I take a shortcut? How can I make this as simple as possible? But let me say unto you, shortcuts always turn into long cuts. You think you might be cutting some corners up front, but it always ends up being more time and more frustration and more work on the back end. Honor the process. Do not take shortcuts. They always end up into being long cuts. And here's what you will be needing to have to do. You're going to have to critically read your journal articles, a minimum of 12 sources. And no one, hardly anyone, can read a journal article through straight to finish and understand. We always have to use some process, some comprehensive study skill or comprehension process. To critically read through your journal articles, you have to read carefully and check for understanding. Am I understanding what I'm reading? If not, you have to go back and reread it until you do understand it. And you have to take careful notes. When you take notes, and we'll talk about this in another video as well, you record only the salient elements, only the elements that directly relate to your question. And when you're taking notes, you don't just mindlessly record the words in the article, you put them in your own words. That is critically reading, and we'll talk about that in another video. But here is the process. When doing a lit review, and for this course, you start with a topic. What's of interest to you? What would you like to do better in your classroom? What's a problem in your school or classroom that you'd like to address? What's a different end state you'd like to see? Oh, I'd like to be able to do math better. Oh, I'd like to do social studies. I'd like to be able to incorporate better discussion skills, or I'd like to incorporate cooperative learning. How could I best do it? All right, so start with the topic, something that is of interest to you. Step 2, put it in the form of a question, and this is so important. This guides everything you do. If you have a specific question It helps guide your search for the literature, and it helps make your note-taking easier. Because as you read, you only look for stuff that answers your questions. You only record information that directly answers your question. So put it in the form of a question, and I'll give you some examples for how to do this. Try to find a question for something you do not know the answer to. Now, you may suspect you have an answer, but you really never have an answer unless or until you review something. So find a question for that you really don't know the answer. That's why we do a review of the literature. You want to find out, what is the best way to teach long division? What is the best way to teach comprehension to fourth grade students, to help fourth grade students comprehend? What is it? Now, you're not doing a report on something. You're looking for data to answer your question. You're not doing a report on cooperative learning. No. Cooperative learning may be your topic, but you put it in the form of a question. What's the best way to use cooperative learning in a social studies class? All right. Then you dig in the literature. So you're not doing a report. You're asking a question and looking for data to answer your question. For example, the topic could be dyslexia. That's a topic of interest to me. All right. I'm not doing a report on dyslexia. I'm looking to inform my teaching somehow. I want to be able to say something to make specific recommendations. I want to become an expert just on my little bit. So some possible questions. Well, what is dyslexia? How can teachers identify students with dyslexia? What types of interventions are effective for students with dyslexia? What type of RTI Tier 1 interventions are effective for students with dyslexia? What types of classroom instruction are effective for students with dyslexia? What accommodations are effective for students with dyslexia to read textbooks in grades 4 through 12? How is it best to develop fluency for students with dyslexia? What methods are effective in developing word recognition skills? What methods are effective in developing word identification skills? You get the idea. You put it in the form of a question, and ideally it's a question that you do not know the answer to. You want to avoid yes-no questions. Is a heavy emphasis of direct instruction, not direction instruction, effective? That's a yes-no question, and that really doesn't answer anything. Instead, what is the impact of skills-based phonics program for students with dyslexia? Or how should we address phonics for students? Something where you do not know the answer. All right, and I'm going to show you, you have to look, as I said, peer-reviewed academic journal articles, and I'll show you how to get those in just a minute. But this is what the end state might be. It's objective academic language that you'll be using. That means no personal pronouns. And you're using the literature. Notice how I cite my sources. It's not what Andy says. It's what the sources say about identifying students for gifted education programs. Howard Gardner defines intelligence. Creativity is a cognitive process. All right, I'm citing my sources. This is what the literature says. Identify students. All right, these are my different sources. This is just a small sample of what the end state might look like. All right, you are looking for sources. Okay, you go to a database of some sort, and your university may have one similar to ours here at Minnesota State University, Mankato. And I'm interested in teaching dyslexia. What is the best way to teach dyslexia? So I'll do a search. That's what you do. And I'm going to refine my search. I want scholarly, peer-reviewed, online texts. I want articles. I'm not looking for books or book chapters. So I'm refining my search. And generally, I don't want to go back to 1900. I want to generally go, I'm going to say 1990, depending on the topic. And then I'm going to apply these filters. So you see here, these are all journal articles, and if I wanted to refine it further, I could word identification. And you get, these are all peer reviewed. Oops, I need to refine my searches again, articles. And I'm going to go 2000. I'm going to apply the filters, and you see. All right, these are all related. This is how you begin to find sources. And I'm going to give you another trick, by the way. Oftentimes, this is how you find sources. You get an article, you log in. I'm giving you lots of tricks here, all right? And let's say I download my article, and there it is right there. And this is a really good article. I don't know if it is or not. 2015, but I'm reading through my sources. I'm reading the Lit Review, and I see, oh, they really cited an interesting source. I think I'm going to get that source. This is where you go to the reference page, and this is how you become a detective, and you get the articles and books that they cited to inform you. To give you another idea here, going to this article here, and let's say it's something that I just really, really liked. I could maybe then go to these sources and find out what they had to say about it. And at the end of the article, you can see the sources here. So this is how you become a detective looking for clues. And this is how it's very easy to get 12 or more sources. All right, this is just an overview on how you might start this process.